At a dazzling Hollywood gala, every gaze was fixed on Keanu Reeves as he strolled down the red carpet, until a desperate young girl broke through the crowd, clutching his leg and pleading for help. The secret she whispered to him led him to immediately halt the entire event. Before we continue, drop a comment with your location, and if you enjoy these tales, remember to hit subscribe. The entrance of the Grand Plaza shone with elegance, its enormous glass doors reflecting the evening's golden hues. Keanu Reeves, entering through the VIP section, adjusted his suit cufflinks, a small gesture to dismiss the nagging discomfort of being the spotlight's center yet again. The lobby was alive with activity, as staff directed attendees to various areas of the venue. Keanu's gaze swept the room, absorbing the luxurious setting. Crystal chandeliers dangled from lofty ceilings, casting reflections on the polished marble floors. A gleaming brass sign indicated the VIP lounge upstairs. Acknowledging a staff member's direction, Keanu approached the grand staircase, opting for the steps over the crowded elevator. Climbing the carpet-lined marble stairs, he observed a blend of both new and familiar faces. Some acknowledged him with nods or quiet murmurs, which he returned with a reserved smile, maintaining his pace. At the staircase's summit, a staff member waited by frosted glass doors, which he opened to unveil the luxurious VIP lounge. Keanu paused at the threshold, taking in the sight. The room melded classic Hollywood glamour with modern opulence, radiating a warm, lavish atmosphere, a reflection of the event's high-profile guest list. Smaller chandeliers cast a soft glow over discussions among film stars, tech giants, and socialites. The scent of high-end perfumes mingled with that of exquisite hors d'oeuvres, and in a corner, a jazz quartet's melodies filled the air. Despite his fame, Keanu felt a twinge of hesitation. He was at once a participant and an observer, a dichotomy he had yet to reconcile after years in the spotlight. As he pondered this, a staff member approached with a selection of drinks. "Good evening, Mr. Reeves," the man greeted, his tone professional yet inviting. "May I offer you a drink? We have champagne, whiskey, and a signature cocktail themed for tonight." After a brief consideration, Keanu chose whiskey. "Whiskey's fine, thank you," he responded, accepting a crystal tumbler filled with the amber liquid. He thanked the server and moved to a secluded area of the room, settling into a velvet armchair that offered both a view and a degree of privacy. From here, he could see the entire lounge. Across the room, a well-known director animatedly shared a story, while a billionaire whispered to a supermodel, their words lost amidst the ambient noise. As he sipped his whiskey, a commotion near the entrance caught his attention. The crowd parted for a new arrival, sparking Keanu's curiosity. Soon, a man confidently approached him, a young girl trailing behind him. The man greeted him warmly. "Keanu Reeves, I'm Victor Langham. It's a pleasure to meet you." Keanu shook his hand, responding cordially, "Nice to meet you, Victor. Thank you for inviting us. It looks like a fantastic event." Victor introduced his daughter, Sophie, who shyly admitted her admiration for Keanu. Despite Victor's prompt to keep the interaction brief, Keanu engaged warmly with Sophie, reassuring her and her father that he enjoyed meeting fans. They snapped a few photos, and Victor suggested a short video for social media, which they recorded together. Afterwards, Victor seemed eager to conclude the interaction, his tone firm as he ushered Sophie away. Keanu noted the subtle change in Sophie's demeanor, from excitement to subdued resignation. As they departed, Keanu resumed his exploration of the event, his thoughts lingering on the brief encounter as he admired the items displayed for the silent auction, his attention momentarily captivated by a vintage guitar and a stunning diamond necklace. It was then that he heard it, a soft yet unmistakably sharp tone near the exit door. "Are you happy now?" Victor's voice was subdued but laden with tension. Keanu instinctively turned towards the sound, catching a glimpse through the slightly ajar door of Victor grabbing Sophie's arm, causing her small frame to jerk back slightly. In a swift motion, Victor pushed her forward, the door swinging open just enough for Keanu to see Victor handing her off to a staff member. The staffer, clad in a crisp uniform, carefully took Sophie by the shoulders and escorted her down a hallway away from the main lounge area. Keanu's expression darkened, a sense of discomfort stirring within him. He approached Victor, who was adjusting his jacket, appearing composed and unaffected by the earlier incident. "Is everything all right?" Keanu inquired, his voice steady yet filled with subdued concern. Victor faced him, his expression schooled to neutrality. "Oh, everything's fine. It's just time for Sophie to go to the children's area. She has to eat dinner with the other kids now. It's getting late, and the event is about to start," he explained, his smile forced and failing to reach his eyes. "You know how it goes with kids at these events, always needing to stick to a schedule." Keanu scrutinized Victor's face, his instincts signaling that there was more to this scenario, though Victor's facade revealed nothing. Before Keanu could probe further, Victor clapped him on the shoulder. "If you'll excuse me, I need to welcome some new guests," Victor said briskly, moving away before Keanu could respond, maintaining his polished demeanor as he greeted another arriving VIP. Keanu stood still for a moment, his eyes fixed on the door through which Sophie had vanished. The grandeur of the gala seemed to diminish, the opulence unable to mask the unease gnawing at him. Left alone, Keanu attempted to dispel the discomfort settling in his gut as he wandered back to the auction display, pretending to peruse the items while his thoughts raced. Victor's harsh treatment of Sophie had ignited Keanu's protective instincts. As he moved from one item to the next, Keanu kept one ear open to Victor's interactions with other guests, his voice now brimming with charm and assurance, starkly contrasting the stern whispers directed at his daughter. Discreetly, Keanu took out his phone and started searching for information about Victor Langham. He scrolled through articles detailing Victor's successful career as an event organizer, his philanthropy, and his ostensibly ideal family life. However, the disparity between Victor's public persona and the private conduct Keanu had just witnessed troubled him. So engrossed was he in his thoughts that he nearly missed the tap on his shoulder from behind. Turning around, Keanu was relieved to see Jacob Lee, a well-known director and an old friend from past film projects, standing with a friendly grin. "You made it," Jacob exclaimed, his tone filled with warmth. "Thought you might ditch us for some secluded cabin somewhere." Keanu laughed, thankful for the interruption from his troubled reflections. "I almost did," he confessed, gesturing broadly at the bustling room, "but it seemed important to be here." Jacob's eyes twinkled with humor as he nodded. "Well, I'm glad you chose to grace us with your presence. Come, let's find a seat and catch up properly," he suggested. They settled into a secluded spot in the lounge, sinking into plush velvet armchairs. Keanu sipped his whiskey while Jacob signaled for a scotch. "So, what's new in the world of Keanu Reeves? Any exciting projects on the horizon?" Jacob inquired, leaning back comfortably in his chair. Keanu smiled, enjoying the familiar ease between them. "A few things in the works," he responded, intentionally vague. "But you know how it is. Can't say too much until the ink is dry on the contracts." Jacob chuckled, his voice teasing. "Always the man of mystery. But seriously, I've heard rumors about a potential sci-fi epic. Any truth to that?" As their conversation shifted to industry gossip and potential collaborations, Keanu finally felt a sense of relaxation, the first of the evening, as they discussed the evolving film industry and upcoming projects. As they chatted about Keanu's recent charitable endeavors, Jacob occasionally pointed out various celebrities across the room, up-and-coming stars, controversial producers, and ambitious socialites. "Oh, speaking of rising stars," Jacob remarked, nodding toward a group near the bar, "have you met the Langhams yet? Victor and his wife are quickly becoming the go-to event organizers for all the top-tier parties." At the mention of Victor's name, The unease Keanu had felt earlier crept back. He tried to sound nonchalant as he responded, "I had a brief encounter with Victor earlier." He seemed quite intense. Jacob's eyebrows lifted. Intense, huh? That's one way to put it. The man is known for his quick temper, especially after a few drinks, but his connections are undeniable, and his charity work is commendable. Keanu nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Victor, who was now engaged in an animated discussion with a group of executives, his laughter resonating through the lounge. For a moment, their gazes met, and Victor gave a quick nod before turning back to his conversation. Jacob, noticing Keanu's focused attention, leaned in and asked, "Have you heard anything concerning about Victor, especially regarding his family?" Jacob's expression turned serious. "Not really. You know how it is around here. Rumors are a dime a dozen, but nothing substantial." "Why do you ask?" Keanu hesitated, unsure how much to disclose. "It's probably nothing, just something I observed earlier," he finally said. Jacob looked at his friend intently before whispering, "Look, Keanu, if something's bothering you, it usually means something's up. But be careful, all right? Victor has considerable influence in this town, and he doesn't take criticism well." As they were speaking, the sound of a bell rang out, drawing the crowd's attention. Victor stood near the entrance, a practiced smile on his face, as he addressed the gathering. "Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're enjoying the evening. The gala will start shortly, so please take a moment to check out the silent auction items if you haven't already. And don't forget to head over to the red carpet for photos before the main event begins." As the guests began dispersing towards the auction area, Keanu excused himself from Jacob, claiming he needed to use the restroom before the event commenced. Making his way through the excited crowd, he headed toward the VIP lounge's restroom, only to find it occupied. He asked a staff member for directions to another restroom and followed their instructions down a corridor, stepping into the quieter hallways of the hotel. As he rounded a corner, Keanu nearly bumped into a small figure rushing in the opposite direction. It was Sophie, Victor's daughter. She looked up, startled, then seemed torn between greeting him and retreating. Sensing her hesitation, Keanu offered a reassuring smile. "Hi there, Sophie. We meet again. Are you looking for your dad?" Sophie glanced nervously down the hallway before responding, "No, I'm actually looking for my mom." "Have you seen her?" Keanu crouched to her level, concern etching his features. "I'm afraid I haven't. But I think your dad is still in the VIP lounge. Should we go find him?" At the mention of her father, Sophie tensed. "No, I don't want to be with him right now," she said quickly, then seemed to regret her bluntness. Keanu's concern deepened. "Is everything okay, Sophie? You seem troubled." Sophie bit her lip, wrestling with whether to confide in him. After a pause, she whispered, "Mr. Reeves, can I stay with you? Can you protect me like you do with the good people in your movies?" Keanu was taken aback by her request, a mix of concern and confusion washing over him. "Protect you, Sophie? What do you mean? What kind of protection do you need?" Tears welled up in Sophie's eyes, but she struggled to articulate her fears. I know you're a hero. Can you be a hero here now?" Keanu's heart ached at her plea. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, trying not to startle her. "Sophie, I want to help you, but I need to understand what's wrong. Can you tell me why you're scared?" Sophie opened her mouth to speak, then hesitated and shook her head, the fear in her eyes evident. Keanu took a deep breath and spoke softly. "Listen, you're being very brave right now, and if you need help, you can always come to me. I promise I'll do whatever I can to help you." Sophie nodded shyly, a hint of hope flickering in her eyes. Keanu continued, "For now, Why don't we try to find a staff member who can help us locate your mom? Or maybe they can take you somewhere safe where you can wait for her." Sophie considered this for a moment before nodding again, albeit hesitantly. "Okay," Keanu said, standing up. "Let's go back to the lounge and ask someone for help. Is that all right with you?" As they turned to head back, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The stark contrast between Sophie's earlier excitement and her current state of fear was troubling, and he made a mental note to keep a close eye on the situation, his protective instincts now fully engaged. He couldn't overlook the man's dilated pupils and the subtle scent of alcohol lingering on his breath. Victor's eyes darted around, barely focusing on the conversation at hand. A bead of sweat trickled down his forehead despite the room's cool temperature, signaling to Keanu that Victor was likely under the influence of something stronger than the champagne being served. "Victor, you seem a bit off. Are you all right?" Keanu asked, his voice tinged with concern. Victor's attention snapped back to Keanu abruptly, the brief sign of discomfort quickly masked by a forced smile. "Oh, it's just the thrill of the evening," he responded, though his laughter sounded strained. Victor tightened his grip on Keanu's arm, slightly more forceful than friendly. "You know, Keanu, it might be best if you head back to the lounge. We've had issues with paparazzi sneaking in before, and the event is about to start. Everyone's getting ready for the red carpet," he suggested, his tone carrying an undertone of urgency masked as concern. Keanu nodded, maintaining his poise. "Of course, I'll head back now. Thanks for the heads up, Victor." As he left the restroom, Keanu threw a glance back to see Victor watching him intently. This encounter only deepened his suspicions. Something was certainly amiss with the Langham family, and Victor's increasingly erratic behavior was a cause for concern. As Keanu walked back towards the lounge, his mind was abuzz with what he had just overheard, Victor's stern words to Sophie and her muffled sobs. He scanned the hallway for any sign of Sophie, but found none. Back in the VIP lounge, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement as guests readied themselves for the red carpet walk. Large monitors displayed the growing crowd of fans and photographers outside. Merging with the crowd, Keanu's eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of Sophie's mother. He had never met her personally, only glimpsing her profile online. No trace of her was to be found. Suddenly, he came face to face with Jacob Lee again. "There you are," Jacob exclaimed, clapping Keanu on the shoulder. "I was starting to think you'd made a run for it. Can you believe the turnout?" Keanu forced a smile, his mind elsewhere. "It's impressive," he replied evenly. "By the way, have you seen Barbara Langham tonight?" Jacob's eyebrow arched in surprise. "Barbara? No, I haven't seen her at all tonight. She hasn't shown up yet. But I did see Victor step outside a while ago. He seemed agitated. Why do you ask?" Before Keanu could answer, a staff member approached. "Gentlemen, we're ready to begin the red carpet procession. If you could please make your way to the staging area." Jacob grinned and straightened his tie. "Well, shall we give the people what they want?" Keanu nodded, falling into step beside him as they walked towards the staging area. Despite Jacob's lively chatter about the gala and the auction items, Keanu's thoughts lingered on Sophie and the unsettling situation he had witnessed. They reached the staging area where celebrities and VIPs were lined up for their walks. Keanu scanned the crowd, still looking for any sign of Sophie or her mother, but saw neither. Soon, a stressed event coordinator approached them, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Lee, Mr. Reeves, you'll be walking separately. Mr. Lee, you're up in 2 minutes. Mr. Reeves, right after." Jacob turned to Keanu with a smile. "Looks like this is where we part ways, my friend. See you on the other side." As Jacob was ushered towards the entrance, Keanu stood alone momentarily, taking a deep breath to center himself amid the cheers and camera clicks filtering through from outside. A staff member approached Keanu. "Mr. Reeves, you're up next. Are you ready?" Keanu nodded, adjusting his suit jacket, silently vowing to help Sophie find her mother if she was still missing once the event concluded. As the doors opened, Keanu was greeted by a wall of sound, cheering fans, clicking cameras, and the buzz of excitement. He donned his public face, smiling and waving as he progressed down the carpet. While posing for photos and answering quick questions, his thoughts raced, balancing his public persona with his growing concern. As Keanu neared the end of the red carpet, a sudden commotion erupted behind him. He felt a tug at his leg and looked down, shocked to see a girl clinging to him. It took a moment to recognize her without her denim jacket, only in jeans and a white top. "Mr. Reeves, please help me," Sophie cried, her eyes locking with his in a mix of fear and relief. She had pushed past security and rushed towards him, tears streaming down her face. Without hesitation, Keanu stepped forward, his protective instincts kicking in, especially when he noticed the bruising on her bare arms, some old, others freshly formed. As the cameras continued to flash, capturing every moment of this unexpected drama, Keanu knew he had to act swiftly. He crouched down, shielding Sophie from the cameras as best he could. "Sophie," he said softly, his voice barely rising above the surrounding noise, "I'm here, you're safe now. Let's get you somewhere safe, and then you can tell me everything that happened." Sophie nodded, trusting him to lead the way. Quickly, Keanu guided her away from the flashing lights and curious onlookers, swiftly moving towards the backstage area, away from the media's prying eyes. Once they were out of view and in a more secluded part of the backstage, Keanu crouched down to Sophie's level. "Sophie, what's going on? Are you all right?" he asked gently, his voice laced with concern. Sophie's eyes filled with tears as she looked up at him. "I couldn't stay in the children's area anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Sophie," he urged softly, taking care not to alarm her further, "what happened to your arms? Who did this to you?" Sophie looked up at him, her eyes a mix of fear and hope. "He hurt me again," she whispered. "Please don't let him take me back." "Who are you talking about, Sophie?" Keanu asked, his voice steady yet urgent. Before Sophie could respond, they heard footsteps approaching. The backstage area, starkly different from the glitzy red carpet, became the scene of a sudden encounter. Victor Langham burst into the space, his face flushed with a mix of anger and panic. Upon seeing Keanu with Sophie, he quickly tried to compose himself. Keanu stood protectively in front of Sophie, his body tense as Victor approached. "Ah, Mr. Reeves," Victor said, forcing a smile that failed to reach his eyes. "I see you've found my daughter. Thank you for looking after her. But I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding." Keanu maintained his calm but stayed alert, positioning Sophie safely behind him. "Is that so, Mr. Langham? Perhaps you could explain the bruises on Sophie's arms? It seems this situation extends beyond a simple family matter." "Sophie needs help," Keanu pointed out, his voice carrying a tone of caution. Victor's smile briefly faltered, but he quickly recovered, masking his concern with a dismissive chuckle. "Oh, those kids will be kids, you know. They're always roughhousing on the playground. Sophie's quite the tomboy, always tumbling and getting into scrapes with the other children," Victor explained, turning to his daughter. "Sophie, sweetheart, come here. It's time to go home and treat your wounds." Keanu felt Sophie tense up at her father's words. He looked down at her, offering an encouraging smile. "Sophie," he said gently, "why don't you tell us what really happened? It's okay to speak up." Victor began to protest, but Keanu raised his hand, silencing him. "Mr. Langham, I believe Sophie is old enough to speak for herself. It wasn't from playing, Sophie stated, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. Dad hits me, and Mom too. He does it all the time. Before the event, he hit me because I didn't want to wear the denim jacket. It's rough and hurts my wounds. When I move, the fabric scratches my skin, but Dad made me wear it anyway. He said it makes me look stylish and hides all the bruises. Sophie took a deep breath, her resolve firming. He hit me too when I kept asking for Mom earlier. Victor's face twisted with anger as he watched his carefully constructed facade begin to crumble. She's lying. This is ridiculous, Sophie. Tell Mr. Reeves the truth and stop playing with your words. Victor blustered, losing his composure. She's just a child. She doesn't know what she's saying. Now, go grab your jacket. Where is it? Sophie's voice trembled as she responded. It is the truth. I'm not lying. My jacket's at the children's rooms, but I don't want to go back there. Keanu, his voice soft yet reassuring, asked, Why don't you want to go to the children's rooms, Sophie? The other kids, they took it. They mocked me for my wounds. They said I looked like a street beggar because of all the dark and red marks on my skin, Sophie revealed, the words causing Victor's public image to shatter completely. Victor's face contorted with unbridled rage as he grabbed Sophie's arm, causing her to whimper in pain. Stop embarrassing me, Victor snarled, his veins bulging with fury. How dare you air our private matters in public? You're weak and cowardly, letting those other children mock you. Go get that jacket now. Sophie, finding a spark of defiance, cried out, No, I don't want to return to the kids' room. I want Mom. Victor's face twisted with fury at Sophie's defiance. He raised his hand, ready to strike her, but before he could, Keanu moved with the lightning-fast reflexes that had made him famous in action films. In one fluid motion, he positioned himself between Victor and Sophie, catching Victor's arm mid-swing. You've done enough, Keanu declared, his voice carrying quiet authority. I've heard people say you have a bad temper, but this is no longer borderline. It's literal domestic abuse. Victor struggled against Keanu's grip, his face red with rage and embarrassment. Let go of me. This is none of your business, Reeves. Keanu maintained his hold, his voice steady as he called out to the security guards who had been watching the scene unfold. Shut down the event now, and someone call 911. The security guards hesitated, looking between Keanu and Victor, unsure of how to proceed given Victor's status. Keanu's voice hardened, the weight of years witnessing Hollywood's darker side evident in his tone. Did you not hear me? This man has been abusing his wife and child. Shut it down now. One of the guards finally nodded, speaking into his radio to initiate the event shutdown, while another pulled out a phone to call 911. Victor, realizing the severity of the situation, began to panic. You can't do this. Do you have any idea who I am? I'll ruin you, Reeves. You'll never work in this town again. Keanu remained unmoved by the threats, keeping himself between Victor and Sophie. He looked down at the young girl, who stared up at him with a mixture of fear and gratitude. It's okay, Sophie. You're very brave for speaking up, he said softly. You're safe now. We're going to get you and your mom the help you need. As the sound of approaching sirens filled the air, the backstage area became a flurry of activity. Security guards maintained their positions around Victor, while event staff scrambled to manage the sudden shutdown of the gala. Keanu stayed close to Sophie, his protective instincts on high alert. Victor, momentarily subdued by the shock of the situation, found his voice again, shifting from anger to a desperate attempt at damage control. This is all a misunderstanding, he said, forcing a nervous laugh. It's just a domestic scene. you know. All families face struggles when it comes to dressing up their children for events. Keanu knelt down to Sophie's level, his voice gentle but firm. Sophie, you've been incredibly brave. I promise we'll find your mother together. But first, I need to talk to the police. Can you stay right here with this security guard while I do that? Sophie nodded, her eyes wide but trusting. Keanu gestured to a nearby guard, who positioned himself protectively near the girl. As the first officers entered the ballroom foyer, Keanu approached them, his voice steady as he began to detail the evening's events. He explained Victor's abusive behavior, the visible bruises on Sophie, and his suspicions about Barbara Langham's whereabouts. The lead officer, a seasoned detective, listened intently before turning to his team. I want a full sweep of this building. Find Mrs. Langham and get Child Protective Services here ASAP, the detective ordered, turning back to Keanu. Mr. Reeves, did you witness any physical abuse directly? Keanu nodded grimly. I prevented Mr. Langham from striking Sophie just before you arrived, and the bruises on her arms, they're clearly not from normal childhood play. As Keanu finished his statement, a commotion near the restroom area caught everyone's attention. 2 officers were leading Victor out, now handcuffed and looking decidedly less composed than earlier. His designer suit was rumpled, and he stumbled, the effects of whatever substances he had taken earlier clearly taking their toll. Victor's eyes locked onto Keanu, a mixture of fury and desperation in his gaze. You'll regret this, Reeves, he slurred. I've got friends in high places. Your career is over. Keanu remained impassive, turning his attention back to the detective. Officer, Sophie mentioned that her father often hid her mother. I think we need to search every room in this building. The detective nodded, already mobilizing his team. We're on it. In the meantime, we need to find a safe place for the girl. Just then, Sophie's voice rang out, filled with a mixture of hope and desperation. Mom. I want my mom. Keanu turned to see Sophie pointing at a nervous-looking staff member who had just entered the area. Please, Keanu said, approaching the man. We need to find Barbara Langham. Do you know where she is? The staff member hesitated, his eyes darting nervously between Keanu and the police. Mr. Langham didn't want anyone to know. Victor is with the police now, Keanu said firmly. The event is over. Mrs. Langham needs to be informed of what's happened. Please tell us where she is. Finally relenting, the staff member led Keanu, Sophie, and a police officer down a secluded corridor. Using an access card, he unlocked a private room tucked away from the main event areas. As the door swung open, they found Barbara Langham sitting alone, dressed impeccably for an appearance she was never meant to make. Her eyes widened in surprise and confusion at the sight before her. What's going on? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Is it time for the photo shoot? Before anyone could respond, Sophie broke free from Keanu's gentle hold and ran to her mother. Mom, she cried, throwing her arms around Barbara. Barbara's initial confusion quickly turned to relief as she embraced her daughter. Then, as the reality of the situation sank in, her eyes filled with tears. Oh, Sophie, she whispered, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. As Barbara held her daughter close, she looked up at Keanu, her gratitude evident even through her tears. Thank you, she said, her voice filled with emotion. Thank you for everything. And the police officer, her voice shaky yet firm, asked, What happened? Where's Victor? Keanu stepped forward, his voice soothing. Mrs. Langham, your husband has been detained. Sophie has told us everything. A mix of relief and anguish washed over Barbara's face as she whispered, I didn't know how to escape. He kept us isolated, claiming it was to protect his image, but it just got progressively worse. The police officer approached, his tone professional yet empathetic. "Mrs. Langham, we need to take your statement, but first, we'd like you and your daughter to be examined at the hospital. It's a standard procedure in cases like this." Barbara nodded, clutching Sophie close. "Of course, whatever you need. I want to press charges. This has to end. Just look at Sophie's arms." The detective then turned to Sophie, asking, "Sophie, can you tell me how often this happens?" Summoning all her remaining courage, Sophie met his gaze and said, "He hits me several times a day, sometimes with his belt or his shoes." Barbara stood up, her voice heavy with regret. "I should have contacted the authorities sooner. I stayed silent, fearing we'd lose our family's reputation and Sophie's future. But now, everything changes." The detective assured her they would record her statement officially as they prepared to leave the room. Barbara, turning to Keanu, her eyes filled with gratitude, said, "Mr. Reeves, thank you for believing in Sophie, for standing up to Victor. I don't know how we'll ever repay you." Keanu shook his head, a small, sad smile on his face. "There's no need for thanks, Mrs. Langham. I'm just relieved that you and Sophie are safe now. The focus should be on your recovery and safety." As the police escorted them out of the private room and through the hotel's now quiet corridors, the full weight of the evening's events began to press down on everyone. They reached the hotel lobby, where more officers and paramedics were assembled. A detective approached Barbara, maintaining a professional yet gentle tone. "Mrs. Langham, your husband has been arrested, but he's been taken to the hospital first due to his condition, likely exacerbated by substance abuse." Barbara tightened her grip on Sophie slightly as she considered her next steps. After a moment, she stated firmly, "I'm not concerned about him right now. We'll follow your procedure and head to the hospital, but I don't want to see him. Preferably, let's go directly to the police station to get Sophie treated." The detective nodded, respect clear in his eyes. "Very well. We'll arrange transport to the station immediately, and medical personnel will attend to Sophie there." As they waited for the police vehicle, Barbara turned to Keanu, her voice trembling. "Mr. Reeves, Keanu, I can't begin to thank you for what you've done. You've given us a chance at a new life." Keanu shook his head, his demeanor gentle. "No need for thanks, Mrs. Langham. I'm just glad I could help. Now, the priority is your recovery and safety." Sophie, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke. "Are you coming with us, Mr. Reeves?" Keanu crouched to her level, offering a reassuring smile. "I'm afraid I can't come with you right now, Sophie. The police need to talk to you and your mom alone, but I promise I'll check in on you both soon." Sophie nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "You promise?" "I promise," Keanu affirmed, his voice soft yet resolute. As Barbara and Sophie were led to the waiting police car, Keanu provided his contact details to the officers. "If there's anything else I can do, please don't hesitate to call," he said. One officer, a seasoned detective, pulled Keanu aside to commend him. "Mr. Reeves, your actions tonight show remarkable courage. Not many would stand up to someone like Langham, especially given his influence." Keanu nodded, his resolve clear. "I just did what I believe anyone should in such a situation. No child should suffer as Sophie has." The detective warned, "Be prepared for some backlash. Langham has powerful friends who may not appreciate his arrest." Keanu responded firmly, "I understand, but I'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat." As the car carrying Barbara and Sophie drove away, Keanu watched until it disappeared, the cool night air contrasting with the evening's heated events. He knew the coming days would bring challenges, legal proceedings and potential professional repercussions. Yet, as he thought of Sophie's bravery and Barbara's gratitude, a sense of peace enveloped him. Turning back to the hotel, ready to face whatever came next, Keanu made a silent vow to use his influence for more than entertainment, to make a real difference, because sometimes the most important roles are those we choose off-screen when faced with injustice.